I remember the exact day in 2015 when our son became an adult. He was home with us in Vermont for about a week, about to go back to Boston, or come back to Boston from our perspective, and start his first Northeastern University co-op experience. And he was going to get paid and everything. He was thinking about all the cool stuff that he was going to be able to buy, and the fun evenings out with his girlfriend, and you sat him down to create a budget.
That's what I do.
You said, okay, Micah, calculate your gross income and subtract your taxes, your FICA, and now your Charlie card, and now your groceries, and now your share of the rent in Dorchester, and now you need new office clothes, and he looked in horror at the rapidly shrinking balance until he went, wait, I don't have anything left at the end of the month. And you gently replied, welcome to the wonderful world of adulthood.
Am I right?
To be an adult is to count the costs, to look ahead at the possibilities and the difficulties, the bridges and the walls, and plan accordingly.
And being an adult is also choosing the story we live by while we count those costs. Why are we counting the cost anyway? Is it because we want to stay as safe and as comfortable as possible? Is it because we want to avoid embarrassment? Or is it to open up what all the possibilities before us might be? The story we tell makes a difference. So in our two Bible readings today, there are many centuries between what Moses said to the Hebrew people at the end of his life and the warnings from Jesus to count the cost that he gave to his disciples. But both of those accounts have important truths to us, even more centuries later, wherever we are on our faith journey.
For a little context, in the reading from Deuteronomy, Moses is near the end of his life. And the people of the Exodus, who have been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years and will soon cross over the Jordan River into Canaan, into the promised land with Joshua. And even though Moses will not cross over with them, he has some words for them. The cultures of Egypt, from whom they were liberated, and the cultures of the land of Canaan, into which they were coming, they were defined by similar stories. That human beings were innately, ontologically slaves, designed to serve those in power, whether they were to serve the wealthy or the royal or the divine.
And so Moses reminds his people that they are God's people, that they've been given a different story, that humans are ontologically created in God's image, and that human relationships are to be about love and dignity and justice, not about intimidation and fear and power.
So choose, Moses says rather sternly to his people. Choose a story that leads to life, not to one that leads you back to slavery or forward into cultural assimilation. Choose follow the path of the God of love, liberation, and justice, who brought you to freedom through the sea and cared for you in the wilderness. Choose the story that is liberating and life-giving and true.
So this week I came across an essay by the Buddhist author and activist, Rebekah Solnit. And she was reflecting back on the disaster of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, which was 20 years ago this week. Solnit recalled how, as the city flooded, the news that came out from both government officials and the news media was almost invariably, about the violence and the theft and the looting that was going on in the flooded city. And some of that happened, but looking back, it's clear that those stories were overblown, and they were almost invariably about folks who were black and folks who were poor. They were really only a tiny piece of the whole story. Because the larger story, Solnit tells us, is that those who were trapped in New Orleans during those first days helped each other out. They self-organized to meet their common need, and they weren't alone. The day after the storm, hundreds of small motorboats began to arrive in New Orleans. From as far away as Texas, ordinary people got up and got into their fishing boats and went to New Orleans to see if they could help or if they could rescue folks who needed it. It was dubbed the Cajun Navy, and they saved thousands of people, 2 and 3 at a time.
Solnit writes this in her essay: authoritarians love to tell stories that make us afraid of each other. But how we respond in disasters shows that people often act with extraordinary grace and solidarity. That we are courageous, we are generous, we are altruistic, we rescue each other, we take care of each other, we improvise the conditions of survival for and with each other. She goes on to say, disaster shakes people awake to who they are and to who they can be and to what they value most deeply, which is meaning and connection, even after lifetimes of being told that really we just want to be pretty and rich, safe and amused.
So Moses and Jesus ask us, who do we want to be? What do we value most deeply, and what story will we choose to live? So here's a more local example. Last Monday, several of us from this church participated in the Prayers for Liberty walk. We joined hundreds of pastors and rabbis and priests and laity from faith communities all around this area to walk from Lexington to Boston to protest the accelerating disaster of oppression and brutality and the abuse of power that we are witnessing in our country. Not unlike the tyranny that Paul Revere and our founders fought against in 1775.
At Monday's walk, the organizers were looking for some March marshals, and Barb and I somehow volunteered. Never done that before, but it meant we got to wear a very cool yellow fluorescent crossing guard vest, and it meant that we had to run
walk fast.
quickly from cross street to cross street along Mass Ave, to help keep the marchers and the cars safely apart from each other at each of the intersections. And we did that through Lexington to Arlington, and then a few minutes after we crossed into Cambridge, I looked a block ahead and saw flashing blue lights. I thought, oh no, we are so busted. Somebody jaywalked. We didn't get the right permits for a march today. Something's wrong. I got up to where the blue lights were, and maybe it was that guy. But it turned out to be a smiling, happy, black police officer standing next to his car, blocking the side street for us so that we could all cross safely. And then we saw him a couple of blocks later doing the same thing. Blocking traffic and waving us through at every intersection, all the way here to Cambridge Common. And as the marchers went by, some wearing clergy collars, rabbinic prayer shawls, keffiyehs, so many signs and T-shirts that were calling for the rights of immigrants, of trans folk, of the homeless, the workers, the poor. The officers were nodding and smiling and showed in their presence, in their flashing blue lights, their solidarity with us and the story we were walking.
And some of what happened is that as we got closer to Cambridge Common, it wasn't just one police officer, it was numerous cars. Black folk, white folk, all sorts of folks together. Wow, a police escort, I said to one of the organizers as we got to Cambridge Common. And he said, oh, we didn't organize this. One police officer saw us and decided he would help us out. And then he called people who are also working today, and they're doing this voluntarily. So we stopped in Cambridge Common to use the bathroom at First Church and to pray and to sing together. And then the group went on down Cambridge Street, and by the time the group got ready to go on down Cambridge Street, the police officers had worked out a plan to block every cross street between here and the Longfellow Bridge to accompany us into Boston.
Once we crossed the bridge, we were on our own.
Yeah, that's right. Boston didn't care, right? Let me say again what Rebekah Solnit wrote. Authoritarians love to tell stories that make us afraid of each other. But how we respond in disasters show that people often act with extraordinary grace and solidarity. We saw that on Monday. She also writes, now we are in another kind of disaster. And I see both the hell of authoritarianism trying to strip so much that matters, and I see the paradise of an engaged civil society responding. I see so many people stepping forward to protect people from persecution, from deportation, the loss of rights, stepping forward to protect the land and the waters, the forests and the national parks, the climate and the truth.
Moses and Jesus both ask us, so what God will you follow? The gods of Egypt or Canaan? Or the God of liberation? What stories are we choosing to tell, and which stories will we live out? What stories do we let go of? Because saying yes to one story means saying no to another. What do we give up? And what do we gain? Count the costs. The life of faith is a process of joining our personal story to God's great story. For us as Christians, our life is joining our journey to the journey of Jesus. A journey which always means choosing love, choosing service, choosing community, choosing hope and possibility, even in the midst of disaster or danger or fear or costly decisions of grace and vulnerability.
Jesus calls it taking up our cross. Rebekah Solnit says it this way: we want to give, to share, to connect, to relieve suffering. Doing so gives us meaning, purpose, and lets us be our largest, most heroic selves. We are made for this work, she writes, and when we do it, we discover who we truly are. And as a person of faith, as a Christian, I would say we also discover whose we truly are.
So, beloved ones, choose your story. Count the cost. You will likely have to give up being pretty and rich and safe and amused. You'll also gain purpose and meaning and a community and love. Moses and Jesus continue to call. How do we answer?